2 Chronicles chapter 35. This will be part 2 of a self-made mess. Now we've come down through the revitalization that Josiah has done with Judah, and he's done a good job as far as outward things are concerned. But we're going to find that he dies in a war, and God had told him, you're going to go to your fathers in peace. So we got to rectify that thing. So the title of this last point, we've just got one point to make, but don't get excited, it's a long one. We'll call this the mortal sin of meddling. 2 Chronicles 35, verse 20. After all this, that's all his cleaning up process he's been doing. When Josiah had prepared the temple, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish by Euphrates. And Josiah went out against him, but he sent ambassadors to him, saying, What have I to do with thee, thou king of Judah? I come not against thee this day, but against the house wherewith I have war. For God commanded me to make haste. Forbear thee from meddling with God. Who's with me? That he destroy thee not. Now, that was quite a statement to make. Here, the king of Egypt is telling him, God sent me on this mission. If you get involved in it, you're meddling with God, and God, not me, God will destroy you. That should have made his ears perk up, but it didn't. We'll keep reading. Verse 22. Nevertheless, Josiah would not turn his face from him, but disguised himself that he might fight with him, and hearkened not unto the voice of Necho from the mouth of God, and came to fight in the valley of Megiddo. And the archers shot at King Josiah, and the king said to his servant, Have me away, for I am sore wounded. His servants therefore took him out of that chariot, and put him in the second chariot that he had, and they brought him to Jerusalem. And he died and was buried in one of the sepulchres of his father. And all Judah and Jerusalem mourned. What's that word? That's what I thought. Josiah, verse 25. And Jeremiah lamented for Josiah, and all the singing men and singing women spake of Josiah in their lamentation to this day, and made them an ordinance in Israel. And behold, they are written in the Lamentations. Okay, so this was a sad event in the life of Judah as a whole. The best king they've had in forever, as long as probably most of them can remember being alive. And now he's dead. We'll find this song in Lamentations. Lamentations chapter 4, verse 20. Lamentations 4:20. The breath of our nostrils, the anointed of the Lord, is taken in their pits, of whom we said, Under his shadow we shall live among the heathen. Okay, that reveals a heart problem with the people. The people were counting on the king to be their deliverer and their savior and protector. Now, God uses men, that's true. But you better be counting on God, not a man. No man's going to be able to do anything for you unless God enables them. And now that's the people's problem, but that wasn't Josiah's problem. He was, as far as we knew, from everything that the Bible says, he did right. He was the closest king to David we can find. In back to 2 Chronicles 35, verse 26. It says, Now the rest of the acts of Josiah and his goodness, according to that which was written in the law of the Lord. Okay, so here, even at the end of his life, even after having died by going into this thing that the guy told him, hey, look, you mess with me, you mess with God, and he'll kill you. And he still did it anyway. Even after that, it's written his goodness. So he was basically a good king and righteous. So you can be like him in life. You can be super spiritual. You can be, on the whole, righteous and good, and still do something very stupid and God kill you for it. And that's what he did. He meddled where he should not have meddled. And he was warned on the front end, you meddle with me, you're actually meddling with God, and God will destroy you. Now, there would have been in his mind, okay, well, I'm just making one mistake. Look at all the idiots that came before me. They had a lifetime of doing wrong. And now I make one mistake and God kills me for it? He might. God decides that. We don't get to decide that. There's no safe sin you can get involved in and God will wink at. The Old Testament, he winked at a lot of things, but here we find him not winking anymore. There's times, and God knows what those times are, I don't, and neither do you. You don't know which sin is going to be the last straw, and he says, that's it. I'm taking you out. Despite the incredible reforms under Josiah, the change of the people were only superficial. Now, the people had done a lot of things, but it was at the command of the king. It was not like it was their choice. It was because he says you're going to go clean up the temple. He says we're going to have a big Passover. Everybody's going to attend. It was not, he's a king, kind of like a dictator. You do it or else. So it's hard to read, were they doing it because they wanted to? Now they're suddenly spiritual and they're turning toward God? Or they just like having their head on their neck? Which... They had shown their true colors under the wicked kings that preceded them. They were all about serving Baal and worshiping the hosts of heaven. They were all into that. Now, a sudden change, just because the king changed, is just superficial. It's just outside. They're just knowing, who they've got to obey and what T's to cross and I's to dot and all that. Inside, they're really no different. So God pronounced judgment on Judah. But he had promised his calamity would not come until after the death of the king. And supposedly, the king is going to get to live in peace, die in peace. And lo and behold, he doesn't. He dies in war. Here's the thing. I don't believe that I don't believe God lied a bit. He was in peace all the way up until he died. It was not a national war. This was something he picked on his own. He went out there and picked a fight where there shouldn't have been a fight. And then he got killed without even knowing it was coming. Somebody just shot a bow up in the air, an arrow up in the air. Shot a bow, that'd be a trick. Shot an arrow, and it found him while he was sitting in disguise. Well, it came out of disguise. Nice. And I was going to give you all the history of the run, but we did that this morning, of how they moved back and forth and how he came through and where he found him in Megiddo there. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 4, we've identified what his problem is. His problem was meddling, so let's see if it's something he should have already known better than to do. Deuteronomy 2, verse 4. This is an odd thing. We think of God only dealing with Israel. But God is good to heathen. You realize that? God's good to the wicked. Sometimes God will give the wicked person an answer for you. And that's exactly what happened here. God was speaking through a wicked king from Egypt, and he wasn't listening. Deuteronomy 2, verse 4. And command thou the people, saying, ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau. What do we know about Esau? Jacob have I loved, have I hated. But let's see what he says about him. Which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take good heed unto yourselves, therefore, meddle not with them. For I will not give you of their land, no, not so much as a footbreadth, because I have given Mount Seir unto Esau for a possession. You know the guy I hate? I gave him a possession. God makes the rules. And sometimes we look around and we see the heathen and we say they're wicked, everything about them, you go tell them off. Well, not necessarily. Maybe God's doing them good and there's a bigger picture than you ever saw. And so make sure you're not meddling in something God hadn't said, go do something. Now, it's not meddling if God said do it, it's a mission. Otherwise, it's meddling. Look at Proverbs chapter 17. Proverbs 17:14. The beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water. When you let out water, it just goes. Water doesn't have to wake up and, have a cup of coffee. No, it just moves. That's right. And the bill just goes. Therefore, leave off contentions before it be meddled with. Contentions. Okay, you don't have to pursue an argument because you're meddling at that point. You're meddling. So there's meddling. A lot of times we'll see what that is by arguing. In chapter 20, verse 3, Proverbs 20, verse 3. Proverbs 20, verse 3. I don't know why Josiah just didn't open up his book to Proverbs, and Solomon hadn't wrote it yet. He didn't have it. They didn't have a book. They had little scrolls. Proverbs 20, verse 3. It is an honor for man to cease from strife, but every fool will be meddling. You identify yourself as a fool if you start meddling. That is talking about something that has nothing to do with you. Here's Josiah. This king had no battle with him. He was coming through his land. You know where they met? At Megiddo. You know what? That ain't part of Judah. You know what had happened? What had happened is Assyria was becoming weak. And as they got weaker, he started recapturing the territories of the northern tribes. We find that now he's claiming Megiddo as his, whereas before it would not be considered his. That's Samaria. That's north of Samaria. That's Galilee. He shouldn't have been up there. That wasn't part of the southern tribes. Their boundary ended just north of Jerusalem. So he's running up here claiming that's his. He says, I see a man on my property. How dare you pass through here? I'm going to kill you for it. Why didn't he stop him down here, in Gad, Gath, Ashkelon, somewhere down in there? That would have been his property. But no, he waits till he gets... Okay, so he's on the wrong footing to begin with. And he's meddling. The guy says, look, I'm not going to do you any harm. No harm, no foul. I'm going up here and we got some business to take care of. Remember when Israel was coming through and they said, hey, we're just going to walk straight through your land. Could you give us some water? Who was that, the Ammonites? And they said, no, you ain't going to get nothing in here. Keep moving. So they had to go the long way around. Well, that's basically the same thing he's doing. He didn't learn anything from his history. Meddling, getting involved in something you shouldn't. Find out from God before you open your big trap if you got permission to say anything. That's a tough lesson. Proverbs 20, verse 19. Proverbs 20, verse 19. It's not a matter of just getting involved with another person, a confrontation. Sometimes meddling is telling somebody else's business that you ain't got no business talking about their business to somebody else's business. Proverbs 20, verse 19. He that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets. Therefore meddle not with him that flattereth with his lips. Okay, a talebearer, care bear, whatever that a talebearer is going to be telling you all these dirty secrets about whoever, and I'm so good. That's what it amounts to. I'm so good, or they're buttering you up. You're so good, you would never. Don't trust them. The other thing is don't meddle with them. Don't argue with them. Get out of there. Flee. Proverbs 24, verse 21. This is a good verse, a very good verse. David, read that one for us. I'm going to change this AC. Given to change. See somebody who's always changing? They've always got a new hobby. They've always got some new hobby horse they're on. They've always got a new gimmick to sell you. Meddle not with that person. Don't get involved in it. They're always changing. What'll happen is you start making an agreement with them. It'll be, 2 weeks, a month, and they've swapped to something brand new, and you're left out in the cold. Meddle not with them. Proverbs 26, verse 17. Now this verse was literally fulfilled in our story. Proverbs 26, 17. He that passeth by and meddleth with strife belonging not to him is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. Now, Israel would have considered any Gentile a dog. And that's exactly what Josiah did. He got involved he was meddling in strife that had absolutely nothing to do with him. And he grabbed that dog by the ears and it tore him up. Killed him. In James chapter 4, verse 1. James 4, verse 1. Here's where it all starts. Meddling can find its root cause right here in the mirror. James 4:1. From whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence, even of your lust that war in your members? There's a part of our body we don't like, although we sure do pamper it. It's called lust. Everybody's got one. There's a little section of you called lust. Now, it may or may not be sexual, but it can be covetous. That's the way that it was defined by Paul. He said, I had not known lust except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. So if you want something that God's not said you could have, now that's how I define it. You can define it any way you want. I say it's as simple as you want something God has not said you could have. It may be well within your power to get. That's not covetous. So what? It's well within my power to go get a banjo. No, it isn't, but I could get in that brown bag and find something. But he's not given me permission to. There's a difference. Just because you can, don't mean God says go for it. So if you desire something he doesn't want you to desire, you're coveting, and that's lust, according to Paul. So all of this fighting, this meddling, this strife, wars, murder, all that stuff stems from that part of our old nature that we can't get rid of. One day God's going to get rid of it for us. Thank you. But until we're off of this planet, we're going to have to deal with it. Here's the way you deal with it. Proverbs 16:32. Proverbs 16:32. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. That's a weird thing to say, especially during this time. During this time, you really had to fight. I mean, it was not as civilized as what we think of life now. Everything was taken by brute force, and you had to fight for what was yours, and so their might meant a whole lot. If you could protect your property, that was good. However, here he's saying, if you're slow to anger, That's better than being mighty. But here's the correlation he gives us. And he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. He said, even if you were mighty enough as a single individual to go up and capture a whole city, you still fall far short of the man who's able to rule his own spirit. That's one of the problems I have with the charismatic movement, is they give themselves over to a spirit that they call the Holy Spirit. But they don't know if it's holy or unholy. They're just assuming that. And they lose control. The Bible doesn't say anybody should lose control. You're supposed to control your own spirit. You should 100% all the time be in control. He says, the spirit of the prophet, this is a prophet, prophesying from God. The spirit of the prophet is subject to the prophet. God never overpowered a man and he had to speak and he was not in control of it. The devil does that. That's not what God does. You always have control. Now, that control will keep you from meddling. For Josiah, that was his downfall. For us, it'll be who knows what. However, control is one of those things that you would work on the rest of your life. You never accomplish it all. And until we leave this earth, I don't think that's one that anybody's going to master. That's just one of those we just all hold our hand up and say, yeah, I need some more of that. Now let's review. Here's our pop quiz. What are the kings that we covered? Uh-huh. Okay, you got one. She'll name them all if I give her a chance. Josiah? That's the last one. Okay. Who? No. You find his name in the list in Isaiah and Jeremiah. But Ammon? That's good. You got it. Manasseh. Manasseh. Very good. Very good. Now, I called this whole thing, what did I call it? A self-made mess. Okay. So each one of these men are responsible for a mess they created themselves. Can you identify what the mess is that each one created? We'll start from the top. Hezekiah. So you had to know something about Hezekiah. What do we know about Hezekiah?
He was the one that was told to put his house in order and was given an extra 15 years at Blue.
Got more time. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what was his problem? He did, but why? Well, you can work on it a lifetime, and you and God will work it out. I'll tell you what I say about it. I say Hezekiah's self-made mess was pride of possessions. He wanted to go show the heathen what he had. Mm-hmm. That was his downfall. His downfall was, hey, look how great I am. Instead of, hey, look what God just did for me. I was supposed to die. I was laying on death's bed. You notice that the sun stayed up an extra 10 hours the other day? That's because of me. Really? That's what he was supposed to do. Instead, he was saying, look at all these good. Look at that gold right there, buddy. I'm going to be dead in 5 years, but look at that gold. Pride of possession. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I wondered when you go to the first account where it shows you in Kings somewhere, that he got sick and that these Babylonians had asked him questions, and I'm thinking, what questions? And then later on, months later, after I did my own research and I couldn't find it because I kept looking up everything under Hezekiah, and then I realized, I didn't broaden my search enough to Babylonians, because it would have pulled up at that point. But in my normal Bible reading, I saw where the Babylonians had asked about the wonder that was done. And that was a time where he should have said how great God was, not how great he was.
Yeah. Yep. Proud of something I hold rather than who holds me. That's a bad one. So, that's a mess that we can get in. None of the junk you own's worth anything. Don't be bragging about it to anybody. I mean, really. That's something a teenager has to learn real quick. Because life starts out that way. Like, when I was young, I liked cars. And I started working at the dealership, and buddy, I was just, in hog heaven. Because I can drive any car I want anytime. And then it wasn't long before you just realize it's all a rolling pile of junk. It's all, what's one car over the other? It's just a car. Who cares? I remember a guy coming on the dealership lot, and he was trying to compare a used truck to some other used truck, and he said, and I was like, okay. He's like, they got a better deal. Okay, that's not what I got. He's like, well, how are you going to sell me on yours? He goes, you want me to buy this? I said, look, buy whatever you want. They're both rolling piles of junk. He was shocked. I don't think I sold him, but that was the fact. Okay, so that's Hezekiah. Now we've got Manasseh. What was Manasseh's problem?
He did evil from the beginning.
Okay. What was the mess he made for himself?
Started building an idol.
No, that's the next one. This is the first one that does it.
Put an idol in the Lord's
Oh no, you're saying he put back everything his dad tore down. Correct.
He burned all his children. Sacrificed
But not all of them, but yeah.
the blood filled
Made his son pass through the fire.
everywhere.
Correct. He did all that. Wicked. So how are we going to boil that down to something we can grab a hold of and apply? Because I don't think you're going to be tempted to build an altar or burn your son. That way you might be, but don't do that.
No, never.
Be with a belt
Right.
for days.
Right. For your pleasure.
Yes.
Okay, so here's what I say about that. Manasseh's self-made mess was satanic peer pressure. He was in the land where the heathens were, and he started adopting the very same things the heathen were doing, and then kicked it up a notch to prove to them he was even better than they were. And that's what a Christian will do. A Christian gets involved in wickedness and becomes more wicked than the wicked people around them. When you're saved, you become a leader. Period. Whether you want to or not, you will become a leader. And if it's even in wickedness, you become the leader there too. You show people how wicked you can become, and they'll do it worse. And that's what he did. So I say his problem was, his self-made mess was a satanic peer pressure that he gave into. Okay, the next one is Ammon. Now that was the son. Remember, he's the guy who only got to sit on the throne for 2 years. It didn't last long. His servants killed him, that's right. He continued it, correct. So, what are we going to say about him? What is his problem?
He was influenced by his father.
Correct, that's it. Ammon's self-made mess was poor leadership, and that was not the leadership's fault. That was his fault. He chose who he followed. We don't have any excuse. We've got a Bible. You don't have to follow anybody stupid. You got enough information right here to identify stupid and run from it when you see it. Now, y'all, I've got the doors locked, so nobody's going anywhere. No. Okay, the next one, our last one that we ended up with was Josiah. Am I saying it right? Josiah. Okay, what was his problem? You already know. Meddling. Josiah's self-made mess was he meddled where he shouldn't put his nose. Keep it clean. Get it out of somebody else's business.
Yeah, if it's not broke, then don't fix it.
That's right. At the shop, I say, let's fix it till it's broke. That's exactly what he did. He was fixing a problem that didn't exist, and he became the problem, and he was taken care of. All right, that'll do it.